Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Success by 6 webinar series, webinar number 2, Developing a Children's Charter in Your Community. I'm just going to go over some of the technical aspects of the webinar before we get started. So just to let everyone know, we've kept all attendees on their audio will be muted just to minimize the background noise. If you have a question during the presentation, you have the option to type in a question in the question box. You'll see that on your webinar control panel, and we'll be monitoring those questions, and our moderator, Joseph, will bring these questions up in real time if possible, and if not, we'll address those at the end during the question period. If you would like to speak to a question, we ask that you wait until the question period at the end, and you can raise your hand by clicking the hand icon on your control panel. That will alert us that you'd like to ask a question, and we can connect you through the audio. We have a few resources that are going to go along with this webinar, which we will email out after the webinar has concluded, along with a recording, a link to the recording of the webinar if you would like to review it or share with anyone else in your community. With that, I will pass it over to Joseph, and he'll get us started.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Joseph Dunn, the Provincial Director of the Success by 6 Initiative in British Columbia, and welcome to our webinar today. It's an extremely exciting hour and a half that we have ahead of us. We're going to be learning the ins and outs of children's charters, looking first at the background of children's rights, different ways to engage with children and communities around this, moving from there into hearing about some great examples of what it looks like to go through this process, develop a charter, and to actualize and mobilize a community around taking that charter and moving it towards policy and practice in a community. We've got some great presenters here. We'll be starting with our colleague Ela from Equitas, who will be giving us that background, and then hearing from early years community and middle years community developers from across the province. And wrapping things up with Anique from the Society for Children and Youth of BC. So just with that in mind, we're thinking about an hour and a half that you're going to be engaged. As Nicole mentioned, if you have questions, please write those in, and where appropriate, I'll bring those up as the moderator and make little interruptions to our presentation if that's convenient, and otherwise we'll have some good time at the end of our sessions to let those questions come out and to dig a little bit deeper. So with that in mind, if we're thinking about children's charters, here's just a few of them to get you grounded in the work of our time together. An example from Richmond and from the North Shore here in the Lower Mainland. And if you can just take a look at these to inspire you and to think about what we're going to be talking about. It's this idea of bringing forward the voice of the child, of the children of our community in their language, from their perspective. What is their sense of what are the rights that they are claiming, and what are the rights that are important to them. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Ela, and from there we will we'll dive into this, this inspiring topic.
Hi everyone, thank you for the introduction, Joseph. I'm Ela. I'm the Regional Program Officer at Equitas International Center for Human Rights Education. And before I dive into children's rights and developing a children's charter, I will be telling a little bit about Equitas and how we work with our partners to promote children's rights. Equitas was founded in 1967, which is almost 50 years ago, to bring human rights from this theory to practice through human rights education, because sometimes we talk about human rights, but it is not that much easy for people to relate the rights to their daily life experiences if they don't have the understanding around it. So we started this organization to bring this human rights from theory to practice and advance equality, social justice, and respect for human dignity. And in Canada, our work primarily focuses on children and youth rights. And we work with diverse group of partners, community partners from schools to municipalities, neighborhood houses to community centers through our human rights education programs. And through this partnership model, we are able to identify the areas that we can improve. What are the areas that we can work together to realize children's rights and maximize children's development in our work. And we strengthen the work of our partners through training, educational tools, and providing them resources, concrete activities, providing them coaching support. Through human rights education, we know that we build their knowledge and promote values, behaviors, and attitudes that lead individuals to uphold their own rights and those of others. It is a process of empowerment that begins with the individual, and it branches out to encompass the organizational structure and the community at large. And when we think about children's rights, in the context of children's rights and developing a children's charter, I want to share how we work with children to build their knowledge around children's rights and responsibilities. We use a participatory educational approach where we create an environment for children to learn through participating interactive games that are based on 7 human rights values like respect, diversity, acceptance, and so forth. To facilitate this experiential learning cycle, we begin with an activity, with a game. To give children concrete experience, we facilitate these activities always with an intent behind it to address issues that children we work with facing, or build knowledge around the issues that affect children in our community. At the end of each game, we do group discussions. We move through reflection on their experience, children's experiences, and ask them what was their experience in the game, how they felt, what was this feeling, and what this feeling made them to think and act, like why they behave in a certain way throughout the game, based on the experience and feeling they had. And then we talk about the strategies they use and how this experience relates to their daily life. And we help children to identify the ways they can transfer this learning into their life and the actions they can take to uphold the values they learned throughout the game. And we have been using this approach across the world in our work with children, and that learning process helps children to become active, engaged citizens as we support them to create opportunities for them to actively participate and find their voices, and develop children's critical, analytical thinking skills, communication skills, and help children to understand the impact of their actions on others, or vice versa, by giving them knowledge about their rights and responsibilities. And if we think about children's participation, it is one of the fundamental rights of children. And when we are developing a children's charter, we need to create adequate platforms, opportunities for children to participate and share their views on the issues that affect them. We play it fair activities, create a supportive process for children, and children's participation in the process shines a light on how we are doing about what we do. They shine a light on the status and sufficiency of policies, program, practices aimed at improving children's environment. The work of us, like whatever we are doing with children in that certain environment, either we are developing, maybe we are delivering a program, or we are creating a policy document, but having their voices included in the process really gives us very concrete information about where is the gap. Children help us to identify the gaps that we as community members need to know and feel in our own capacity so that all children's rights are respected. That builds understanding, and working collectively we can improve the quality of environment in which children are born, grow and learn. And we know each of us has different roles in our community, but if we can really identify the gaps and work collectively, we are able to improve the environment of children. And we support children's development through these activities. As we are supporting their development, we also see we create a change in the way our partners, stakeholders think, how they see their roles and the responsibilities to move children's rights forward and make them respected and realized in our communities. What are the rights and documents that outline children's rights? Today, I wish we had time that we can thoroughly go through those documents and review each of them in depth. But today, because of the time limit, I will be giving a snapshot of each of them. And as Nicole mentioned earlier, she will be also sending us the links so you can check the documents in your own time as well. Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is the fundamental document that is adopted in 1948 after World War II, and it sets common standards of achievement of human rights. It outlines the human rights that are fundamental and belong to each human being simply because they are human beings. It is a declaration, which means it doesn't officially have force of law. However, it is internationally recognized. It is one of the most recognized international documents. It is internationally recognized standards by countries that encourage countries to review, reflect on their own legal documents and practices to recognize, respect, and promote human rights in their own country. And in Canada, human rights are defined in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, as well as laws and codes that are adopted at provincial level as well. The rights of the child are specific rights that aim to protect all human beings younger than 18 years old. As a side note, the rights that are outlined in UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, apply to all human beings regardless their age, including children. The reason of creating a convention on the rights of the child was providing special protection for children. If you can go one slide back. Okay, perfect, thank you. The Convention on the Rights of the Child is an international treaty that is ratified by Canada in 1991, and also it is one of the most recognized and recognized international treaty in the world. Except Senegal, all the countries signed, and by Canada signing this, it has legal responsibility to ensure the recognition and protection of children's rights. It is embedded in the Canadian Constitution to ensure that any law that is inconsistent with provisions of the Constitution is of no force. The Convention on the Rights of the Child is a recognition that enabling children to express themselves, have their views heard, and respected in their homes, schools, and communities in early age will enhance their sense of belonging, readiness to take on responsibilities, and also it will support them to develop. And the Convention requires each level of decision makers and community to take responsibility and take necessary measurements for the realization of children's rights. And if we can go to the next slide, there are 54 articles in the Convention. It is hard to probably remember each of them, as individuals. But when we are working in our work, it is important to keep these 4 guiding principles in our minds. Whatever the program we are working on, the policy we develop, and those are 4 guiding principles of Convention of the children's rights. One of them is non-discrimination and equal opportunity, which is basically telling that all children should be treated fairly and with respect. It doesn't matter where they come from or where they live, what their parents do, whether they have a disability or whether they are rich or poor. Regardless, all children must have the same opportunity to reach their full potential. And right to life, survival, and development is outlining that children and youth have a right to the basic things to live, survive, and develop. And we have responsibility to create this environment to make that happen. Best interest of children, of youth. I think it is a question for like all of us to ask. Is the decision that I'm making is really for the benefit, best interest of kids, best interest of children and youth. So in this way, we can reflect back on our work and give decisions that are for the best interest of children. Respect the views of children and youth is a guiding principles to ensure that children and youth has the opportunity to participate and have their views considered when we are making decisions that will affect children and youth. So it is connected to the participation of children and youth. And Children's Charter encourages all stakeholders, each of us, to really deeply think about our work and reflect on our work in terms of the best interests of children and protect their rights. All children are unique and deserve access to their rights. However, there are services, policies, practices that defines how much they can enjoy their rights sometimes in the reality. So it is a responsibility of all of us to really reflect on our work to identify the gaps and areas that we can improve. And if we think about like Children's Charter and what is the purpose of Children's Charter in our community, like each, if we can go to the next slide. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All children wants to be successful, and it is really up to us, our community, the community they live in, to make this happen by ensuring adequate support and social infrastructure in place to put the healthy development and well-being of children first in every aspect of the decision making in our community. And having a local children's charter in our community help each members of the community members to make a commitment to the children living in their community, to review and revise the work that we are doing, raise awareness about the issues that are affecting children, and understanding, like keeping us up to date. For example, there are indicators that are identifying the level of realization of children's rights in our community. So reflecting back on our work, identifying what is available in our community, what is the situation of the realization of children's healthy development in our community. And from there, really making decisions that will improve the work that we are doing and help to support children to reach their full potential. And from there, by doing self-assessment and taking necessary measurements, we will be creating good practices and policies which will ultimately affect children's healthy development.
I think I'll jump in there, Ela,
yeah,
just because you've given us some a great point of departure for where we're going in our conversation this afternoon.
yes.
For those of you out there listening in, what Ela was providing, just to quickly summarize, was just how critical the supports are available through Equitas in terms of coaching, training, resources. For those of you who are in your community and aspiring to create a children's charter, some unique document that represents the children of your community. We heard about the process, of creating this kind of document, the opportunities for children in being part of that process, and the ways that Equitas is ideally placed to support you with some of the tools, the resources, that coaching in order to follow through on those engagement processes that really get the voice of the child to be part of that eventual document. We also heard about the principles behind the rights of the child, resources that can support the community in understanding rights as a concept and bringing it into practice. And we heard about how Equitas can help guide your community through that children's rights and charter journey. So just a reminder before we let Ella finish her closing comments and move on, if you have any questions about what you've been hearing, please just write those in, and I will either bring those up or we will get to those at the end of our webinar presentations. But any questions that you're having about how can you and your community benefit from these resources and from this support available through Equitas, please let us know, and we'll try and clarify those through the webinar and be able to follow up afterwards. Any final comments from you, Ella, before we move on?
Thank you for the great summary. I think the only highlight that I want to make is we know each community has different needs, and children have different needs as well. So because of that, in our coaching support, whatever resources that we are providing, educational toolkit or coaching support, we really take into the consideration who you are working with and what are the needs and how we can make it realistic for you to adopt. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Ella. And I think just responding to a few questions that have come in, this presentation and these slides, which I'm sure you all appreciate, are a great way to introduce this topic to the broader cross-section of stakeholders in your community that would want to be part of this process. These slides will certainly be available, as will this recording of this webinar, and I think it would be important for you to go to the Equitas website as well to see some of these other resources, the Play It Fair material in its full complexity. So moving right along, we will turn the mic over to Susan Foster and Angelo Lamb, the early years and middle years coordinator in the Tri-Cities area of the Lower Mainland, to start to tell us a little bit more about how to put this into practice, how to get started with the Children's Charter, what are these first critical steps in bringing the community on board and moving forward with this activity. So over to you two.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. We're going to kind of do a bit of a tag team here because we're together. So I'm going to start. So for us, when we were looking at doing this project, we of course thought we knew that a number of other communities had done it, and you know, obviously in the spirit of R&D, which is rob and duplicate, we thought, hey, let's talk to some of our partners and find out what they've done. So for us, because we're located here in the Lower Mainland, we approached Richmond and the North Shore, and you're going to hear from both of them later on in the webinar, so we're not going to go into any detail about what their process was. But what we really wanted to do was learn from both of them, because they were a couple of years ahead of us in the process. And so we invited both of them to come to our community and to present about what they had done, what they had learned, what some of their challenges were. And as a result of that, you know, we kind of looked at it and realized with Richmond we have some similarities in terms of a cultural makeup. With the North Shore we have some similarities in terms of geography. We have multiple municipalities, for example. So, you know, taking those things into consideration, it really helped us in terms of looking at where to go. So that was really, really helpful, and I would really recommend if you can get someone else to come in and talk about their experience. I think that was a really engaging piece for our tables in terms of them wanting to do it. And then the other piece that we had in place was a few years prior, the ECD table had done some work. Actually, originally was supposed to be a memorandum of understanding, but that was too threatening, I guess is the word, for our municipalities, and so we ended up creating what we called a community accord for early childhood, and that involved us reaching out to our 5 municipalities as well as our 3 libraries, Fraser Health, our local school district, the Ministry of Children and Family Development, and the United Way of the Lower Mainland. And so we had those 12 partners sign the accord, and that is something that they have reaffirmed every year since the initial signing. And so that document more or less was sort of a precursor because it talked about the importance of children and the importance of supporting children in our community. So we had that as a foundation and really thought that that would be a good place to start when we started working on this project. So I'm going to turn it to Angelo now, if you can maybe move to the next slide.
So there was a lot of information that we were able to get from the experience of Richmond and the North Shore. And after learning about and thinking through the experiences of Richmond and the North Shore, our early childhood and middle childhood planning tables came up with an overall plan. It was a way for us as tables to really decide sort of what were the phases of the work that we were going to do. So you can see from the slide that we came up with sort of 3 main phases that would guide the work that we were going to do with the charter. So the first one was to ensure that we would have a process where children between ages of 0 to 12 could help create a children's charter. Then once that was done, we would then work towards creating an infrastructure of support to make the charter a working document in our community. And once that was in place, then we would sort of hold the official community-wide launch of the charter. Now the key takeaway on the slide was that after sort of learning from Richmond and the North Shore, we sort of flipped the last 2 steps around. So instead of having the community-wide launch once the children's charter had been created and then working towards implementing the charter, we've been focused on working with our public partners and agencies to develop structures in our community that will make the charter a working document. And once that's in place, then we will be doing a public launch of our charter. So that's the main takeaway of that slide. The next slide, it gives you a bit of an outline that we have in our Tri-Cities Child Rights website. Can you see the next slide?
Yep. Yeah, it's here.
Yeah, okay, here we go. So we've documented our ongoing charter process at the, on this website, so feel free to sort of look at that later on if you want to dig in a little deeper. I'm going to do a quick run through of the site for you. It's that we started with an invitation to key people, organizations, and schools to a visioning event about the idea of a children's charter. Included in that invitation was some basic information around children's rights, charters from other communities, and data like the EDI and MDI around how children in our community are doing. And based on what participants said at that visioning event, we began to plan 2 important steps. So the first one was a professional development event for staff of organizations working with children between the ages of 0 to 12. So the first one was really for those in the early childhood area. So perhaps maybe Susan might want to mention that.
Yeah, so we had a really great half-day workshop that SCY put on for early childhood staff, and one of the things that they did was we went through a couple of activities, and we did a lot of work around how can we engage young children, because it's quite different to engage young children than it is to engage school-age children. So we did a lot of work around that, and that kind of formed how we ended up doing the engagement piece for the 0 to 5. So I'll talk about that in a second. I mean, Angelo could talk about the 6 to 12 first because that happened before the 0 to 5. So
right. So for when it came to those working with the older children, we asked Equitas to come in to provide a workshop, a Play It Fair workshop, to the staff from organizations that work with children between the ages of 6 to 12 and their families. And it was just The idea of doing this was we wanted to make sure that we were creating at least a basic awareness among organizations in our community about what child rights are, and to also get people thinking about child rights. So then the second thing that we had planned was to have children learning about rights and to share what was important to them. So the first thing that we did was we held a kids conference in our community in collaboration with School District 43 as well as Equitas in order to gather the voices of school-age children. So that was for the older children. Then we had a parallel thing that we had done for the younger children.
So we actually looked at some of the activities that Equitas had, and we were trying to decide if we could adapt them, but then we actually brought together some early childhood educators in our community, and we actually developed our own activities kit. And what we decided to do was there were 3 questions that they had asked children at the kids conference, and they were around things like, you know, what do you want, what do you need, what do you like about your community? So there were some key questions that were asked, and so we reframed those for the younger children and had early childhood programs actually get kids to draw pictures of those different things, which was really, really cool. And then we kind of collated them. And part of the jump off for that was we gave every single program a book called Whoever You Are by Mem Fox. And that was a gift that we gave them. And they used that as part of the activity. We built that into the curriculum for that activity, so they would read that book to the children and then do this activity around getting them to think about wants and needs. And it was really interesting because we weren't sure if that was going to actually give us any data, but Angelo was the one who did all the roll-up, and I know you were amazed at what came back from the younger kids.
It's really amazing in the sense that they are really, they're actually very articulate about sort of how they feel about what's happening in the community and what they feel they need. So from all the information that we collected through the conference and through this activity kit, this information became our Tri-Cities Children's Charter. So then last May we revealed the charter to our public table members and public partners at our Tri-Cities Champions for Young Children Awards of Excellence event, and since then we've been focused on creating structures in our community that will make the charter a working document. That's really sort of the focus of our work right now, and so we're sort of in that phase 2 of that 3 phases that we showed in the previous slide.
Yeah, a big focus for us right now is actually trying to engage kids in the implementation piece and working with school district around how that might happen with the new curriculum, etc. So I think that's all we had at this point
for now.
And so yeah, if there's any questions or if you want to move on to the next piece.
Thanks, Susan and Angelo. Another very, very thoughtful and helpful piece along this this story that we're telling this afternoon. Just to recap a little bit here, we heard about the stage of engaging with the community, educating the community about rights as a starting point, and really bringing up that topic of conversation, and then a very thoughtful and patient involvement of children in that process. We heard about how our community accord, it was a place to start in the Tri-Cities, and how I've seen myself how it's such a source of pride, but it also works as a means of ensuring commitment of the different leadership and stakeholders in that area. And finally, we heard about how that breathing and living and working document came to be, how the voices of children have such clarity when they're given that opportunity, and how that's leading to a document and a thorough process of engaging with the community. So thanks so much for that, and for letting us see how you took the support of the Equitas and of the Society for Children and Youth, and you brought that forward even further and complemented it with your own local solutions for engaging children's voices in the process. So once again, please continue to send your questions along, and we will try and bring those into the conversation. But for now, we'll continue along, and we'll shift a little bit, not too far in the Lower Mainland, but over to the North Shore. And Fran, who is the early years community developer in that area, is going to talk about Once this is established, how does that children's charter continue to develop if we follow that pathway in the community, engaging children in that process and the steps that were distinct to her communities along the North Shore? Thanks, Fran.
Thanks, Joseph, and thanks to Susan and Angelo for including our work with your conversation. And just to point out that we have all borrowed and shared extensively to get to our goals around child's rights and charters. For the North Shore, the initial focus of the early years and middle years planning tables was on building community awareness around the importance of child rights lens to create strong, sustainable communities and safe, healthy, and supported children. The focus on developing and implementing a North Shore Children's Charter followed along as a process about 3 years after we had begun working on the child rights itself. We wanted to create a list of 10 key child rights that related closely to the 42 articles of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, but were readily understandable and relevant to North Shore children, as well as to adults in a variety of roles in our community. We use 3 strategies, basically, to collect the thoughts and feelings of children around their rights and their feelings about their rights and how their rights connected actually to their responsibilities. And firstly, with thanks to Helen Davidson and the Richmond Children's First Table, we learned of a bookmark making concept that had proven most successful with children in kindergarten through grade 7. To support this, we created a lesson plan with a book for classroom teachers to use to get a conversation started with primary age children and intermediate age children. This initiative ran aground rather quickly at the beginning, as it was the year of the teacher strike and we weren't allowed to use the schools for our purposes. We were delighted that the 5 North Shore public libraries and several after-school care programs came to our rescue and engaged over 150 children in the bookmark contest. The winning bookmarks, and you can see one of them as an example here, the winning bookmark at each grade level was printed out professionally and distributed widely at fairs, through our Wheels program, through the schools actually, and through a number of other resources. The winning artist was presented with a certificate at our Rights to the Child showcase ceremony. In addition, we collected the rights identified in all these bookmarks entries and included them in all marketing materials in a variety of ways as we moved through the remainder of the process. Secondly, we held a workshop for childcare providers on the importance of child rights in their programs and in the community. We also provided them with a lesson plan and an appropriate picture book to share with their classroom groups. Again, building on work from Richmond, we suggested providers work with their children to make or draw a large tree that would hold leaves that children would illustrate with a right that was important to them. Adults would print the wording in on their behalf. These leaves were then to be attached to the trees they had designed. This concept also hit a small snag in that my concept of a maple leaf, while patriotic, was almost impossible for 4-year-olds to cut out properly and required the investment of considerable adult intervention. An alder leaf would have worked much better for sure. Our third strategy was for me to attend childcare programs, read a rights-based book such as the one that Susan has mentioned, and talk about the concept of child rights with young children. Afterwards, the children were encouraged to complete a template for a pin-on button with a picture of the right that was important to them and often something that was written by an adult. We go to slide 2. Once we had collected children's thoughts on their rights, we worked as a planning table to incorporate this thinking into our planning table process. This included a facilitated activity for both planning tables to identify UN Convention rights that were determined to be most important on the North Shore. The result of this process were taken to our Rights of the Child subcommittee that combined the input from children and from the planning tables into a list of 10 North Shore child rights. We were encouraged by the Society for Children and Youth to choose one right at a time over a year or two to focus on as a community. Rising early years vulnerability on the North Shore, as evidenced by the EDI in 2011, has encouraged us to focus heavily on the right to play for our community awareness approach, as it was by far the most popular right for North Shore children, and as research has shown, it is a powerful strategy to address social, emotional, and physical vulnerabilities at all levels. We are continuing to promote the other rights in a more subtle manner. And to add in, which I didn't plan to, we are about to have our second Be the Change preteen conference, which Equitas is participating in and did also last year. And it is an opportunity for preteens to engage in workshops and conversations around their role in implementing child rights into the community as leaders of that kind of change. Once we had established and endorsed our list of 10 important rights for the North Shore, we had these endorsed by a variety of agencies and organizations through a number of different processes that were available to be viewed in a lot of different ways. And what I'm going to ask them, Joseph and Nicole, to show you now was a video that was created at the Child Care Center, sponsored through North Shore Neighborhood House, and working with the planning table. So here is the summary, pretty much all that I have been talking about. Thanks.
All children are entitled to the same rights, no matter where they come from or who their parents are. We asked our children on the North Shore to tell us what they believe their rights are. We illustrated these rights in a creative bookmark making competition. Here's what they told us. I have the right to be loved. I have the right to make friends. I have the right to learn who I am. I have the right to learn. I have the right to exercise. I have the right to learn. I have the right to stand up for myself. I have the right to have fun. I have the right to freedom. I have the right to learn. I have the right to have peace. I have the right to I have the right to have freedom. I have the right to
So I think we just had some technical issues there, but I think we've got a good sense of what that video was providing in terms of the voices of the children coming forward. I think what we all heard very clearly from Fran was letting us know about how the movement of the community started with just an awareness of child rights as that point of departure, how bookmarks and innovative ways were used to encourage communication from children, if not in words, in pictures, in stories, and how that focus found its way to particular rights, and that way both reflecting on other research, but giving the community an area of focus upon which they could really dive into a little deeper. Any last comments, Fran, or any questions from out there in our participants in the webinar?
No, but the video is available on YouTube, so if people want to hear it, or it also is available with the scripts across the bottom, they can find it on YouTube, and if the link isn't available, I can provide it.
Great, thanks, Fran, and yes, certainly for the sound and to see that whole video, which is a very touching little piece. Please, we'll make sure to have that available. It will be accessible through the webinar's slides, but also we'll make sure that that link is available afterwards. So with that further step of hearing more about the process, about what a community is doing with this information, how they're taking those voices of children and defining their ambitions and their goals around the Charter, we're now going to move further away from the Lower Mainland into the interior to the North Okanagan, and more particularly to Vernon, where the early years community developer there, Lynne Reside, is going to talk about how engaging with children with the Charter eventually moves forward to further steps of mobilizing the community around the activities of the group and of the work of the Charter and the words of the Charter. So over to you, Lynne.
Okay, thank you. I hope you all can hear me. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of how we started the process and then how we've moved forward because of our Children's Charter. So originally we had a grant from the Leadership Institute of the Early Childhood Educators of BC to undertake a community project as part of leadership development. And we had focused on children's rights for quite a few years in our community, just around planning for National Child Day events and raising child and community awareness. And we had a small committee called the Champions for Children that was looking at children's rights in our community, so we decided that we would build on the work they had done. So as part of the leadership initiative with ECEBC, there were 3 ECEs from Vernon who were the lead partners, and they worked closely with our local branch as well as our early years table, the North Okanagan Early Years Council. And so we formed a planning committee, and it was made up of representatives from these 2 groups as well as a city councillor. And our goal was to recognize children as active citizens in our community and give them a voice. We saw children as citizens that don't have a vote, and they needed a voice. So we explored the process of other communities, as others have done as well, and looked at children's charters both in BC, in Canada, and abroad. So our first step was to hold focus groups with child and youth practitioners, and then with youth, with children, with community stakeholders, including classroom teachers. We asked a 10-year-old child to design the artwork for the charter, and you'll see that if you look at the charter that's going to be sent out, the copy of our charter. And we have used that artwork extensively in many, many of our promotions. She should be asking for royalties, but so far she hasn't. We also used the International Children's Rights song, Here I Am, and it was adopted as our theme song. We had originally planned to write our own song, but we found this song. It's free online, and it is international in scope. And then we hired 2 local children's musicians to adapt the song and teach it to children. We held a flash mob of the children singing the Here I Am song, and these are very young children, children under the age of 6, and they learned some other songs as well, and they sang in them all in a flash mob. They also sang on a number of other occasions, including a child poverty forum that we put on as part of the initiative, recognize that poverty can really undermine children's rights. We had very young children in childcare programs each paint a square of fabric that were all sewn together into a wall hanging. We really took with the younger children, we took a really arts-based approach with music and art for them to be able to express what they needed to express. So we had an installation in the art gallery of the wall hanging, and children and the community, families, childcare centers were all invited to attend the grand opening of this wall hanging, and then the children had an opportunity to make art cards. And then we also hosted workshops for educators in the community about the UN Convention on the Rights of Children, and as well about our process for the Children's Charter. And we really wanted our educators to be able to teach children that they work with about their rights in the community. We designed large street banners that included photos of local children as well as their artwork on the banners, and each banner also had one of the rights that we had identified on our Children's Charter. And they were designed to be displayed during November for National Child Day or May for Child Care Month. And they go up not every year. Sometimes we don't meet the deadline, but we still have them, and they're very beautiful. So we printed many rack cards with the Children's Charter and have a goal that every child in the community will grow up with one posted in their bedroom. We chose their bedroom because that's their space, and that they will know about their rights, and know that they are important to their community. And this has been very effective. We do it at every event. We hand out these rack cards. And then after we had developed the whole Children's Charter, and it was pretty well a year of doing a lot of different activities, developing the charter. Then we asked all of our local leaders if they would endorse the charter. The city had worked alongside with us, and we had communicated with some of our local leaders, but we wanted them to sign the charter. So we held a huge picnic in the park. We had over 500 people attend, which is a very large number in Vernon, and we had large poster-sized versions of the charter for people to sign, and you may see that on the photos that I've provided. And then the children sang again. And then large signed copies of the charter are displayed in City Hall, in our school board office, at a health authority, and out at our band. And then smaller versions have been provided to many organizations to display. So if you could just move to the next slide. That's just in a very, very quick nutshell what we engaged in to get to through the process of developing our children's charter and who we engaged with. And now, if we did that in 2012, we have learned mostly just by trial and error that having that children's charter has been the foundation for us to move forward on other initiatives around children's rights and around engaging our community in supporting children. So it really raised, opened doors and raised awareness for us to continue to promote a rights-based approach in our community. We followed up by asking the city to appoint a counselor, a city councillor to the North Oakland Early Years Council, and her engagement on the early years table has had a very far-reaching impact. We have made the National Child Day partnership with the city an annual event, and we ensure that there is lots of media coverage and information both about the UNCRC as well as the Vernon Children's Charter in our local newspapers, Facebook, and Twitter. And the event is that we have children take over City Hall. So the children all come into City Council, they sit at the councillor, on the councillor and mayor's seats. The mayor comes in with his fancy necklace and meets the children, and they all want pictures taken with him like Santa Claus. And he talks about, you know, the children's charter and how the city, how the children are important to the city and how some of the decisions they make are on behalf of children. And they all get a cookie. So it also really strengthened our partnership with the city, so that when we came to the city and asked them about hosting the city's Fit for Children Provincial Summit with a focus on municipal engagement, they supported us. And they endorsed the application, they provided staff time, they provided website access, and they provided some funding. And when we put on the city's Fit for Children Summit, we had large banners of the Children's Charter displayed throughout the summit to ensure that the delegates saw it and understood that the city's Fit for Children Summit was grounded in children's rights and in our take on what is important for our children in our community. We were able to partner with the Society for Children and Youth for a youth photo voice initiative in conjunction with Cities Fit for Children, and they also presented at the summit. Again, you know, going through the process of developing our children's charter helped us to strengthen our relationship with those rights-based organizations such as the Society for Children and Youth and Equitas, and set us on a track to embed child rights into many aspects of our community. During the process of developing the Children's Charter, we formed a very strong relationship with a local high school class that's a little bit of an alternative program, and so they participated at the signing of the Children's Charter. We're very strong volunteers and helpers at the signing, and they also were engaged in the planning of the City's Fit for Children Summit. And so we asked them to help us to pick our workshops, and we asked them, some of them, to participate in the Youth Photo Voice initiative that was funded by the Society for Children and Youth, and we were able to leverage funds to have a group of youth attend the conference. And we really felt that that was important, because when we developed our Children's Charter, because we were mostly early childhood people, we felt that the youth part of our charter could have been stronger, and that's something we would like to revisit. So now we've had the charter for almost 5 years, and we want to move forward with it. We're going to have a celebration in 2017 on the 5th year of the charter, and we have a commitment from one of our city councillors who has been an ongoing participant in all of these initiatives that have been leading us forward. She really wants to make her last term, this is her last term as a city councillor, she wants to help us to ensure that that some of those articles or some of those items on our Children's Charter are embedded into our municipal policies. So one of the ways that we're working towards that is that I am participating in the Public Policy Institute with the United Way of the Lower Mainland to develop a family-friendly Vernon policy framework that will have children's rights embedded in that framework. So I've been doing that after each session at the Public Policy Institute. I have a conference call with the Family Friendly Vernon Advisory Committee and just share what I'm learning about how to move things into into policy and how to get government to support your agenda. So again, we've been looking at other cities that have done this as well. So all of these things, you know, I wish I could say we had the forethought to plan all of these different initiatives that we have undertaken as, you know, steps on our journey, but really it wasn't really that thought out. We wanted the Children's Charter, but that Children's Charter has just been so foundational to everything else that has come behind. So I think that's all I want to say. The pictures you're looking at were from our celebration in Vernon, and it was probably one of the largest gatherings we had of families in our community.
Thank you, Lynne. And just to maybe follow up, a few questions have come up about where you received, you mentioned a grant that started the engagement process, and as well you mentioned about Youth Photo Voice initiative. Could you just explain a little bit more about those two aspects?
Yes, so the grant, I meant to tell you about that. So the grant was from the Early Childhood Educators of BC, and because I am an early childhood educator, I was aware of it, and because I'm also the early years, I was the early years coordinator for Vernon, it just was a great opportunity. So they had a Leadership Institute, which unfortunately that funding is not available anymore, but we were able to get $10,000 to undertake this, and so it really provided us with opportunities, which I understand if you don't have $10,000, it may not seem that you could do all of those things, but many of them would not have a cost if people were doing them already, within their job descriptions or whatever. But it did help us to just go a little bigger, to do the banners and to have a lot of forums where we could provide nice food and to print a lot of the rack cards of the Children's Charter, that sort of thing. But it certainly can be done for less. And we were not paid for that. It was, I did it as part of my job, but also the ECEs that were involved with it, they were doing it, basically either off the side of their desk or voluntarily. As far as Youth Photo Voice, that was something that the Society for Children and Youth was doing, and I'm not sure if it's an ongoing thing or not, but what they did was they came to our community and they taught youth how to use cameras effectively, and then the youth were asked to go and do some photography in the community that would reflect on their rights, and then the photos were put onto large, like on canvas and on large frames, and we had a gala event one evening at the City's Fit for Children where these were all displayed, and then the youth got up and talked about their photos, and it was quite an amazing thing because these were youth. Some of these youth are quite marginalized in our community. And some of the photos they took were just heartrending, really, and talked a lot about, and I think it was a real education for our community to see how some of our youth get through their days, and also a good education for them. They learned a lot about photography in a very short period of time and did beautiful photographs, and they also learned, public speaking. They got up and talked in front of a group, and then we had a band, the same band that worked with our children, that just got us all rocking at night and dancing with the youth. So it was a wonderful opportunity for us, and I would say if you're interested, just to contact the Society for Children and Youth and see if they still have that funding available.
Thanks so much, Lynne, and we'll hear more about those resources in a few moments from Anique. But just as we're moving along, just to once again summarize a little, we've heard now a few different stories of what are these promising practices and currents that that we see each of community has found in their own way ways of engaging with key partners. In the case of Vernon, we've heard about how the municipality saw their particular role and particular leadership in the discussion around children's rights, and really taking the charter and embracing it as a municipality, and also the key role that early childhood educators can play with families and children in this process, and how critical it is to engage these different community partners in the storytelling process, that children have that opportunity, that empowering opportunity to be part of every stage of developing the charter. So thanks so much, Lynne. And we're going to move now to back to the Lower Mainland area and over to Richmond, where Helen Davidson, the Early Years Community Development Coordinator in Richmond, will give us a bit more of a sense of what are these next steps once the charter is developed. How and what does a community do with that charter? How do we impact policy and practice and keep moving that document forward and keeping it alive and making change? So over to you, Helen. Great. Helen, are you there? Okay, I think we'll figure out, we'll get back to Helen in a moment, and I think we'll move forward and we'll hear from the Society for Children and Youth of BC, and Anique is going to tell us a little bit about their resources that they have available to support this process, and some of the work that they've been doing that we've already been hearing here and there already in our previous presenters. But we're going to hear a bit more specifically about these next steps and what are some of these supports and resources available through the Society. Anique?
Great. Thank you, Joseph. I just want to start off by thanking the United Way and Joseph and Nicole for putting this together. I just think it's so fantastic that there's so many people interested in children's rights. I think everyone, it's safe to say everyone on this call is interested in the well-being of children and youth, but to frame it from a rights perspective is really quite exciting. So I'm very happy to be involved with this. So my name's Anique Ross. I work for the Society for Children and Youth of BC. We do all of our work through the lens of children's rights and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. I focus specifically on work related to child and youth-friendly communities, but we also do a great deal of public awareness and capacity building around children's rights and using a rights-based approach to work. So I'm just going to reiterate, I know this was touched on by some of the other presenters, but some of the things that a children's charter can help do. So firstly, it can raise awareness about issues affecting children in our communities and really offer a benchmark of key indicators of the well-being of children in the community, and it can offer a point that we can report back on regularly. It can also be a starting point for various groups and coalitions to really rally around the health and well-being of children and start breaking down those silos to increase that we're working collectively towards the well-being of children and youth. It can also identify some of the principles needed for our children and families to experience a high quality of life and really outline the shared responsibilities between a variety of stakeholders. And I think quite excitingly, it can ensure that policies, programs, and services are interpreted through a child-friendly lens. So this brings me to what I wanted to talk about next, which is child and youth-friendly communities. So one way of moving this work forward is to look at creating a more child and youth-friendly community. So a child and youth-friendly community is essentially a way of operationalizing children's rights. They seek to fulfill children's rights in the spaces that affect them the most, so namely their neighborhoods and communities. And they really look at child rights and child well-being from a very holistic perspective. Some of you may be familiar with UNICEF's Child Friendly Cities initiative and the work that they're doing to kind of spread this, this type of work. But really it's something that's, you know, many municipalities have started to recognize the value of this approach, and it's really spread to become a truly global movement. It's been done in all sorts of different ways, by a variety of different groups all over the world. So UNICEF has devised a framework for action which is comprised of 9 building blocks. They're listed there on your screen, just very briefly. Promoting children's active participation, a child-friendly legal framework, a citywide children's rights strategy, a child rights unit or coordinating mechanism, a child impact children's budget, a regular state of the city's children's report, making children's rights known, and finally independent advocacy for children. So obviously within these there's varying degrees of difficulty to implement these, and obviously with, you know, the way that government is structured, different things may fall under different jurisdictions, but anyways, taken together they really do kind of help to create a more child and youth friendly city or community. So what can we do next? Well, I think you know, some of the other participants really mentioned some great examples of things that can be done by organizations that commit to this children's charter or communities that have taken this on. And both organizations and municipalities can take many steps towards creating a more child and youth-friendly community, but it's really important to consider the type of buy-in and the existing resources that help this process along. So, for example, I'm just going to talk about a bit of work that we've done recently with the City of New Westminster. So building on the work of their children's charter, we recently completed a process over a couple of years to help develop a child and youth-friendly community strategy in partnership with the City of New Westminster for them. And really, quite excitingly, this was actually adopted by Council a couple weeks ago. I don't think it's available yet publicly on their website, but it will be shortly. And I would really recommend you check it out because I think it's a really great example of a very conscientious and comprehensive child and youth-friendly community strategy. So basically, within this process of creating it, there was extensive community engagement work in which children, youth, and parents were surveyed to really help inform the goals and actions associated with this strategy. And all of this information was further bolstered by in-depth research into you know, academic research around various aspects of child and youth friendliness, but also other locally existing research as well. Additionally, there was significant internal consultation with city staff to ensure buy-in and alignment with existing work. And something that's quite exciting to really document that's used, City Council has designated the implementation of the strategy as a strategic priority for the next 3 years. So this, along with their family-friendly housing policy, will really help to ensure that New West is a wonderful city for young people to grow up and really have their rights fulfilled. So in the case of New West, it really made sense to create a standalone document. But obviously with different communities there's varying opportunities or needs that exist, and so there's different ways of approaching this. So for example, in another community that we're working with, they're currently redoing their official community plan, and in that instance it makes sense to directly embed elements of child and youth friendliness and really use that child-friendly lens directly within the official community plan. So obviously a strategy or other planning and policy documents are one way to move this work forward and to move the rights that are outlined in a given children's charter forward. But there's a variety of ways that this work can be done. So in some communities there may be really strong leadership at the top, and in others this may be a process that's sort of more grassroots with policies or initiatives being undertaken by specific groups. So for those who are looking for resources, information, and ideas on how to approach this work, we've created a website. It's childfriendlycommunities.ca, and I'd really recommend you have a look. We've put a great deal of time into really trying to put a lot of resources in one place and tools. So on the site you can see there will be 18 different domains. So the domains sort of try to approach all the different aspects that can fall under the jurisdiction of a city or a community, a rationale as to why each domain is important for children and youth, how they link back to the rights of children, an ideas bank, and an assessment tool. So it's a really great starting point for thinking of ways to move your children's charter forward. In addition, our main website, the scyofbc.org, we've got a number of resources related to all things children's rights, so I really recommend that you have a look there as well. A lot of our resources are available for free or are downloadable, so please have a look. And
Thanks
also
so
feel
much,
free to
Anique.
contact me if you have questions. Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks, Anique. What you offered there was another great repository of information, of resources. I've been to that website a few times myself just in the last couple of days, and it is a great place to find all sorts of good ideas and just some really thoughtful inspiration for communities that are really trying to tackle creating child-friendly environments. And some important messages there about what strength can come from that integral partnership with the municipality in supporting the movement towards looking at children's rights. So we will get back for other questions for Anique in a moment, but for now let's just backtrack a moment to hear from Helen Davidson and hear about some of those other more, I guess, examples of policy and practice of the Children's Charter as they've been taking place in Richmond. Helen?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we're great. Thanks.
Yay! So I'm going to actually shorten mine just in the interest of time, so there's time for some questions. There's lots of stuff on our website at Richmond Children First. If you look under the charter, the video and another video are both there, and the quality is much better if you go right to the website. And there's lots of resources there about how we engage children and all. And I'm really just going to focus on how we are actually working with organizations to endorse the charter. We've actually created a brochure around endorsing the charter, and you can download it from our website. And one of the things that we really wanted to do once our charter was endorsed by our city council and then went out into the community is we really wanted people to reflect on what they were already doing within their organizations. And so within the brochure that we sent out this list of questions for them to have a look at so that they could think about how they might want to move forward with committing to a charter. Can you switch to the next one? We very much recognize that commitments would be very different for different organizations, and so we've given examples, and organizations have made commitments to the charter in very different ways. Some of them have simply put a charter up in their waiting room for people or the reception room for people to see. Others have very much taken the charter and used it both within policy and practice. So the city of Richmond is probably the one who has most used the charter. They recently approved their new social development strategy, Building Our Social Future, and the charter is actually recognized as a social development policy within that charter. And they play a key role in helping children, youth, and families to thrive. And so through mainly through recreation, the charter has really been sort of a practice tool. So children have been involved in planning neighborhoods, playgrounds, developing programs. All of the community centers in Richmond have approved the charter and are using it around planning programs. And then more from the social planning side, it's a document that's used around many of the policies that are developed around poverty, affordable housing, food security, all those types of things. The charter has also been used a lot through Richmond Public Health, through Vancouver Coastal Health. Our Director of Population and Family Health has probably given more presentations than anyone within our community, and she's given them to staff at the hospital, she's given them to senior management. A lot of groups have had presentations. And so from a practice perspective, as children as patients, things have changed. There have been changes made to the lobby at the hospital. There are all sorts of things that have been done. So we had initially asked when organizations had endorsed the charter if they would let us know. We were really hoping that we could try and monitor that, but it's been very difficult to do. Instead, we basically provide the charter, and we have very giant copies that we give out to organizations to use as they might want to use it. And so in addition to sort of the regular nonprofits and public partners who've endorsed the charter, it's also been endorsed by the Richmond chapter of the University Women's Club. It's been endorsed by the Board of Directors of the library. It's been endorsed by our Richmond Public Agency Partners Group. It's been endorsed by QP Local 716, which is the non-teaching workers within our school district, and they're all using it in different ways. We continue to work within the community to try and get others to endorse the charter, but it still continues to be a hard sell. I think for organizations that are very much involved in the lives of children and families, they understand it. I think beyond that, we've tried to sort of connect with businesses. It's a little bit harder to understand. It's very much a living document. We're working right now on how can children actually participate, and how can people really use children's voices to not only children's voices around the decisions that affect them, but on various things in the community. If you look on our website, it was an earlier slide, but I don't have time to go back to it. There's actually a big example of a graphic facilitation piece where we worked with Society for Children, Youth, and Equitas, and we asked children around, what do you like about the City of Richmond, and what do you think could be different? It was an incredible way to engage children, and I think it's been something that's been just as powerful as actually having a charter. And so for any of those, just visit our website and you can get a lot more information, or give me a call or send me an email and I can fill you in. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Helen, and I'm sure we will come back with questions in a moment to some of the incredible material you were talking about and some of the achievements. Just to explain to us a little bit more about this idea that you're mentioning about the difficulties of engaging with business around the charter, because clearly you've had some great successes in Richmond around affecting policy and bringing on those endorsements. What kind of lessons learned can you share with us about, I mean, some of the obstacles of finding those commitments and finding openness to the charter?
I think, way in the beginning, we almost put the project off because we couldn't get it off the ground. And that was a lot to do with recognizing that children have rights in sort of Western communities within Canada. I think that there is this perception that the UN Convention on the Rights for the Child very much focuses on countries where children really have no rights. And so when we first started talking about it, and I went to different groups to sort of start to bring the idea forward, there are a lot of people who just think that children belong to their families and they don't have rights. So it's been a huge communication and awareness piece that we've had to do, and I think that there's now a very broad understanding within public partners and nonprofit organizations. But businesses, it's a different type of messaging that has to happen, and it's something that we haven't looked at doing yet. I think we're probably more likely to look at more of a child-friendly community piece, and we're looking at maybe going off more in that direction. We tend not to use the language children's rights very much. I think that we try and inform people that children do have rights, but also very much within the context of their age, and also that their opinions matter just as much as opinions of others also.
Great, thanks so much for that perspective. So we've reached the end of our official presentations, and now it's the opportunity you have to really get those burning questions that you're wondering about in your community. You're thinking about starting, as we heard, perhaps with its beginning with an accord, a charter, perhaps the process is really with the initial stages of what are the rights of children as we educate people and when we start that conversation with children. So I guess this is your chance to reach out to all of our presenters who you've heard this afternoon, from Equitas, from the Society of Children and Youth BC, from Vernon, from the North Shore, the Tri-Cities, and from Richmond. What are you finding? And as you can see there, those are all their contact information, and they've all offered to be able to follow up and be able to answer questions about their development. And as we've seen, a lot of those key documents are available on their websites. But this is a good chance to get those questions about whether it's starting the process or what are these goals that that can help inspire our community to move along. The first question that I'll begin with is particularly to Ella and to Anique as well, for the community that's beginning this process and wanting to begin really brewing up some enthusiasm. Where would you recommend that that a coordinator begins their story for a community in learning about possibilities and learning about what's available?
So I'm Ella from Equitas. So with communities that are interested in, actually we can just work with them to see like where they are at, what are the needs and what are the stakeholders that they are planning to work together during that process. What are the target group? As Angelo and Susan mentioned, sometimes the groups are mainly working with early childhood. Sometimes they involve student school years children as well. So what are the groups? So from there we can actually identify what are the support that we can provide as Equitas. And at the beginning of my presentation I was sharing the ways that we support our partners, and many of the presenters also mentioned the way we support. If you are interested in, I would encourage you to actually reach me via phone on our on our phone number BC office, 604-876-4881, or just email me your interest, and then we can see what is where you are at in your local community and the number of stakeholders that are gonna participate, and what's the end user of this outreach program that you're gonna run. And from there we can provide you staff training, we can provide you the activities, but not the activities, also the modification for your specific group. As Susan mentioned, sometimes one specific activity may not work for your particular group. So how we can actually make it work for the group that you are working with, for the children. And from there we can...
I think I'll just cut you off there, Ella, just because you've offered such a great and an open invitation for people to follow up with you and to really talk through what are some of these stages and really get a sense of what's going to be involved and what's required. I'll just toss that over to Anique to let us know.
Great. I was just going to say that I think it's really important to seek out the other champions in your community who could assist with the process, whether that's going to be the community tables or your municipality or at the school board, whoever they are. But I know that it was very valuable with the work that was done in the Tri-Cities to kind of convene a children's charter committee, people from a variety of different stakeholder groups who wanted to participate and wanted to contribute and move this initiative forward. So I think just that's a really good starting point. Do some presentations, try and bring different stakeholders on board to this, and really by that way you're kind of ensuring that there's more collective impact around this.
Great, thanks so much, Anique. And I think as we've heard, there's great places to find both the resources and some models to both present an idea of what's possible and inspiration for what can be achieved. Another question has come up about how do we think about charters, children's charters relative to community early years strategic plans? And I think there we can kind of make the connection, and this might bring us to another question around funding. So as many of you are involved in early years community planning, you know that communities work collectively with a planning process and think about actions and strategies to accomplish these priorities. And many of these communities that we've heard from today have identified a priority was tackling this conversation around children's rights, and that's led to a focus on children's charter, of developing a children's charter as one of those critical strategies of development and as an action that meets some of the ambitions, many of the ambitions of those planning tables and early years councils. So, and that brings us to the idea of in making those decisions, that can lead to identifying funding sources, whether, as we heard from early childhood educators of BC, through Success by Six, community strategic engagement funding. These are different sources that can be leveraged along with, as we've heard before earlier, municipal support and other members of the society. Often service clubs have an interest as well in the idea of focusing around public awareness and children's rights as well as part of their beliefs as service groups. Any other comments from our speakers around particular ways that funding can be found and support is available? I think I'll start with Susan, just to tell us about how you're able to make the activities of developing your charter. How was it financially possible?
Well, we used mostly probably our Children First funding that we use for community capacity building, because most of the money went into staff time. So we actually provided some funding from our Children First funding to the middle childhood table because Angelo took the lead, just mainly because ages 6 to 12 is a much bigger piece of work to engage in this particular initiative, and so we knew the focus would be there, and that's out of the realm of my area, but because it was a joint project, we sort of reallocated the funding, and then the funding that they had at the middle childhood table for his coordination time was used for that. And then we also had a lot of contributions when we did events. So, for example, when we did our kids conference, we had lots of contributions from our municipal partners, from our school district, etc., who everybody kind of cobbled some pieces together.
Great, thanks so much, Susan. I see that we're just about at the end of our time today, so I think with that in mind, I'll just reiterate that all of the information that you've been hearing about and seeing is going to be made available to you through our list of those participating today. You'll be receiving our slides and a whole plethora of resources that go along with that. Most probably important is that slide with the communication connections to the different presenters, who are really the incredible resource and wealth of this presentation today. I did want to just, before we get to our final conclusion, just let you know that this is the second in a series of 5 webinars that our Success by 6 provincial office is organizing through until June. The next one is on the State of the Child report, and that will be in a similar format, looking at some incredible work of creating different types of State of the Child reports across the province, looking at the material and data involved in those, and ways that this other piece of early childhood complements the work of both public awareness and supporting investment in the early years and engagement of the community in ways both similar and different from the Children's Charter. I guess as we wrap up today, I would just like to once again thank our presenters, Ella, Susan, Angelo, Fran, Lynne, Helen, and Anique, who have brought so much light and shared their passion about what's been accomplished across the province. I will invite you all to participate in our upcoming webinars, and please let us know if you have any suggestions or thoughts for how we can improve the webinar experience. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nicole to wrap things up.
Hi, everyone. So just to reconfirm what Joseph mentioned, there will be a follow-up email which will include all of our resources as well as the presentation slides and a link to the webinar recording. The recording will be hosted on our YouTube page, and I'll share the link to accessing that on the follow-up email. If you have any questions about the presentation, feel free to email us at the provincial office or reach out to any one of our presenters directly through their contact information. Thanks for joining us and have a great afternoon.